Now, on the program today, two major flashpoints in Nigeria's politics and economy. In Rivers State, Governor Siminalayi Fubara returns to Port Harcourt after 6 months of emergency rule as questions linger over how he will navigate his fierce rivalry with predecessor and FCT Minister Nyesom Wike. And in the oil sector, a fresh showdown. Depot owners under DAPMAN threaten legal action against the Dangote refinery over allegations of fuel diversion, while Senator Ali Ndume urges restraint, warning that attacks on the $20 billion plant could undermine national interest. This is Standpoint. I am Precious Amayu. Now, Rivers State Governor Siminalayi Fubara has returned to Port Harcourt, ending a 6-month political vacuum. He arrived at the Port Harcourt International Airport on Friday to a rousing welcome from supporters, and that's just days after President Bola Tinubu lifted the emergency rule in the state. Governor Fubara and his deputy Ngozi Odu had been away since March when President Tinubu declared a state of emergency following a bitter power tussle between Fubara and his predecessor, now FCT Minister Nyesom Wike. A retired naval chief, Vice Admiral Ibo Kete-Bas, was installed as sole administrator during the period. The crisis split the Rivers State House of Assembly, raising fears of instability. But a reconciliation effort in June brought Fubara, Wike, and other key actors to the table with the president. And now, as governance resumes, attention shifts to how Fubara will navigate lingering political rivalries, especially after local council elections in August, where the APC swept 20 of 23 councils, leaving the PDP with just 3. Legal practitioner Evans Ufeli joins me for more insight into the political situation in Rivers State. Good to have you join us.
Thank you.
So I remember one of the, again, welcome to our studio. I know this is your first time here. Yeah. But, you know, I remember one of the episodes on this program we had when you were on. You were on with one of the then deposed local government chairmen. And I don't know if you remember that episode. It was a back and forth between both of you.
Very well.
And on the legal proceedings that were going on at the time, you were trying to interpret it to him.
Yes.
But he had a very different, idea of what it meant.
Yes.
But as you look back now, coming from all of that and what has happened in Rivers State now, state of emergency, governor has resumed. What do you make of it all?
Yeah, what I make of it all is that the democracy we have in Rivers State have been highly ruptured, given that the governor had to be away for 6 months because of the state of emergency, which was actually very controversial and highly criticized because the Constitution in Section 305 never preempted or suggested that a democratically elected governor should be removed. The Constitution made copious provision as to how a governor can leave his seat, either by death, resignation, or by impeachment. If the Constitution had preempted that a governor can be removed through a state of emergency, it would have been included in that section that talked about how a governor can vacate his seat. You understand? So, but that is behind us now because the case is before the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court have not determined the matter. And then the pendency of the state of emergency is over. But the case has not been withdrawn. It's still before the court. So it must be attended to sometime in future. But when you look at it, the Fubara I see today, from the speech he delivered that I read, even though it's very difficult to predict politicians, especially in Nigeria. But from the speech I read, I see someone who wants to be subservient going forward. I mean, coming from a whole hog of crisis, I've not heard from the state, from the Speaker of the State House of Assembly. I've not seen any publication.
He spoke during the first plenary they had, asking him to submit his appropriation bill. But some people will agree with you that maybe largely his power has been whittled down. But that's we have spoken from people from that state who say, look, this is not a man whose power has been whittled down. He's not been foolish, in court in all of the matter, that he's just embracing the path to peace. So that you can have progress and prosperity in Rivers State.
Yes, peace is what is required for democracy to even thrive. Because when you go into the nitty-gritties as to whether or not the state of emergency was proper or improper, we're still going to meet crisis. You understand? We're still going to meet crisis. Or whether what the House of Assembly did or did not do, or what the governor did or did not do, if we begin to probe all that after all this problem, we're still going back to the problem. So
I know you talk about, apologies for interrupting you, I know you talk about the state of emergency. For those who now say, because I spoke with someone from the state yesterday, she's in a civil society space, and she said, looking back, and this, I asked a high question about the state of emergency, and she said it does look like the end has justified the means. As long as now there's reconciliation and peace, they don't really have a problem with the state of emergency because now there's led to peace in the state. Do you agree that somehow the end has justified the means?
No, I do not agree. From the standpoint of law, you don't use wrong to quell wrong. Okay, so what you call peace today is because there has been a state of emergency and now everyone has resumed. You understand? It's too early in the day to say that the state of emergency has quelled the crisis in Rivers State and has brought peace. It's too early in the day. Let's watch it for the next 1 year. Because you have 40 cases in court as we speak. So cases in court is dispute. Maybe the state of emergency, because these persons were sacked, they are no longer in the flashpoint. There's nothing they could have done. You understand? So it's too early in the day to say that there's now peace. Peace. You can only determine peace when people are still in their position and they have chosen to turn a new leaf. Not when they were sacked. There's nothing they could have done to continue the warmongering and the rest of that. So let's give it some time. If they have learned any lesson, the future will let us know about that. But as to the conclusion that there's now peace, I don't think it's a safe way to assess the issue as we speak.
So in terms of assessing the issue, we'll get back to Rivers State and its politics, but let's talk about the role that the judiciary played in all of this. Many believe, in fact, quite obviously, the judiciary played a role in exacerbating the crisis with various, in fact, sometimes from courts of what's that word again?
Concurrent
jurisdiction. With very different judgments on same matter. Just looking back now, what do you make of the role that the judiciary played in all of this?
Yeah, the role of the judiciary is to resolve disputes based on Section 6 of the 1999 Constitution. That's our primary responsibility. But you see, that role is very complex because you have litigants, you have matters before the court, and you have a lot of cases at the same time. But you see, these cases, they may look the same, but sometimes they are not exactly the same. Because a court will only give judgment or ruling based on the evidence before it. You understand? So if you have two cases in two different courts, and the evidences before those courts, or the evidence before those courts, are different, the outcome cannot be different. Cannot be the same, rather. The outcome cannot be the same. So that may have played a role. But ultimately, when you look at it, I do not think that given the level of dispute and the number of cases in court, the judiciary would have handled it more than they did because there was a lot of confusion. 40
different cases still in court. That's a lot for just, what would seem like a very simple issue to resolve.
Yes.
But doesn't the judiciary have the power, the moral standing to say, look, it's a court of concurrent jurisdiction. It's not like you went to the appeal or the Supreme Court.
Yes.
If the High Court in Rivers State, for example, is sitting on one matter, shouldn't the High Court in Abuja, for example, say, well, let's wait for the judgment from Rivers and then we'll see how that
The High Court in Rivers State sitting on a matter can only do that when they have jurisdiction. You understand? But when it has to do with dispute between institutions of government, the High Court does not even have jurisdiction. But in Rivers State, the High Court were entertaining matters that is outside jurisdiction. And when they give a ruling there, the other party goes to the Federal High Court and starts another matter. So there was a lot of convolution. It's not just the law court, but the lawyers were also filing these cases. And the lawyers were also advising these parties. Because when a case gets to a court of law, the court must first assume jurisdiction to determine whether it has jurisdiction to hear the matter. And we saw that all over in these cases. Why one is ending, another one is starting. There were appeals, remember? There were different matters filed for different purposes all together.
And in that conversation you and I had, I think it was with Anosike, I think so, who was holding on very tightly to the judgment given by Justice Omotosho. And then there was another one given by, I can't remember the chief judge now, in Rivers State. And so it was different judgments on the same matter, but everyone held on to theirs. Yes. Doesn't the judiciary have the ability to regulate itself and sanction every judges and lawyers? It has
the capacity to regulate itself and sanction, the NJC sanction judges accordingly. You understand? And while that case was ongoing, we saw a lot of that happening. There are times when petitions were flying up and down against judges within that same circle. But because the judiciary regulates from within, it may not be in the news, it may not be in the public glare, but the judiciary, the NJC definitely looked at all this matter. That is why, that was why they came up with this issue that if you are filing a matter, you must file an affidavit of non-duplicity to state that while you are filing this matter has not been filed in any other place. To avoid forum shopping, where people will go file one here, file one here, file one here, and then begin to determine among the three judges who is likely to give judgment in their favor. So if you are filing a case, you have to be on oath to state that this matter has not been filed in any other place. That's why they introduced that from the rule book and all that, to regulate conduct of lawyers who have the tendency and proclivity to want to create multiplicity. And then you start to have problems from different angles.
Mm. And there are those who say, look, the 40 different cases have now been overtaken, events have overtaken them. And perhaps, everybody should move on, even with the one at the Supreme Court. I mean, what would be your reaction?
In the spirit of settlement, I think that the ones before the Federal High Court and all that should all be withdrawn. But I don't think the one in the Supreme Court should be withdrawn, because it gives us another opportunity to determine whether or not the president can remove a sitting governor. Because the last time we had this before now was in the case of Joshua Dare in Plateau State, where the state of emergency had been declared by Obasanjo, and the Joshua Dare, the governor, had been, and the Attorney General went to court, you understand, to challenge the propriety or otherwise of that action. And the counsel to the government brought an action before the court and said that he's no longer the Attorney General and he cannot file a case on that ground. So the preliminary objection was upheld by the court. And so the matter didn't go on. The substantive suit was not determined. Now, in 2025, another opportunity was presented to us for the Supreme Court to now state exactly what the matter is, so that we can have a precedent, so that going forward, the president will know where his power starts in Section 305 and know where it ends. Because the express mention of one thing excludes the other, and if in the section of the law that states that a governor can vacate his position by impeachment, by resignation, or by death, if that section did not in any way in a subsection state that in the state of emergency, the president can also, order the governor to vacate his seat, then it means that the Constitution, jurisprudentially speaking, never contemplated that. But that is my argument as a lawyer. We need to take it before the court, let the court adjudicate on it, because the law is what the court said the law is, and nothing more pretentious. So let the court determine it. And the matter is still before the court. Whether it has become an academic exercise or not, the Supreme Court should determine the matter. Since it has not been withdrawn, it's still before them. 5 months running, they've not. During the NBA conference, there was a call made by one of the speakers to the Supreme Court to determine that matter, so that going forward, a president, when we have precedents, so some people have argued that because the head of the judiciary is appointed by the president, it will be difficult for the CJN to do the needful and tell the president the truth. And I said, no, that shouldn't be an excuse. The judiciary should be independent, absolutely independent. And there's this further argument that perhaps we should tinker with the Constitution to take care of that lacuna, such that the head of the judiciary should emerge through a voting process. Just like, because it's only the judiciary that you have appointment. The three arms of government, the legislature, the executive,
Isn't
and
that
the judiciary.
supposed to be the most senior justice who
Yes.
just automatically fills in?
Yeah, the most senior fills in, but then he's recommended by the NJC, then appointed by the president. That's the process. Whatever other arm of government, they're elected directly from the electors, the electorate. So they have the mandate of the president have a mandate of the people, the members of the legislatures, they have a mandate of the board. For the judiciary, you have that appointment procedure. People have argued that in very civilized democracies, they can only be dispassionate and they can only act in the interests of the country in a situation where they emerge through a voting process, whether through the judiciary arm of lawyers voting them in, or you just create
a body of
yes, a way to.
But let me ask you about, as we look at what has, again, River State, the relationship between the executive and the legislature. In hindsight, how do you think that states and state governors can better manage that relationship? The
relationship between the executive and
the legislature. Because again, that was one of the biggest, as much as we know that, yes, the FCT minister, had a role in all of this, but the contention mostly was now with the State House of Assembly. They were divided, two different speakers, three on one side and another number on the other side. You have to submit your appropriation bill also became a challenge. And how do you think that, managing that relationship should progress going forward?
Well, the relationship can be managed when they're able to stay away from disputes. As long as the House is not divided, because for that of River State, they were divided at some point. Because first, the State House of Assembly, they actually contributed to this whole crisis. Yeah, because we woke up one morning and we saw them saying that they've defected. And they had flags and the rest of them, that they've defected from PDP to APC. So when the crisis deepened, all of a sudden they turned around and said they did not defect. And so the problem became so much so that the rumor went round that they are trying to form a bloc to impeach the governor. From there, the State House of Assembly complex issue happened. From there, it degenerated. The few members who were loyal to the governor, then he started presenting, presenting budget to that number that is not a quorum was a contradiction. And at the same time, the other side were not ready to, it became so difficult. Apart from River State, there's no other state, maybe Edo State in the past, that had similar issue. But just that President Buhari did not declare state of emergency. In my opinion, that of Edo State was even deeper. The crisis deepened further because they carried crane and all that to block the front of this House of Assembly and the rest of that. So, but in this case, the state of emergency came in and intercepted all that.
But let's not forget that in the case of Edo State, there was not necessarily explosions. In the state, like we had in River. I mean, it was a real blown crisis.
Yes, I understand that. And there was no predecessor or governor that was witch hunting or fighting another governor and the rest of that in Edo State. But in this particular case, it became so bad. Both sides couldn't manage the crisis and all that. And it took us to this point where we had to go into a 6 months period of the action. And today, I think it is better that they look at the populace, the electors, the electorate, and really deliver the dividend of democracy to them. They must comport themselves and act in ways that show that they are progressive. It's not, you cannot hold on to every wrong under every political system and hold on to issues. If they don't do this, we won't do that, and the rest of that. You are going to court every day. At the end of the day, the people haven't really get hold of the dividend of democracy in that state. So there's a need for them to cooperate now, with the governor, to say the least. And then, for the first time, they should work in harmony to make sure that it's a state that is heavy in resources and the rest of that. There are states that don't even get 1/4 of what Rivers State gets in terms of resources and the rest of that. So they should take advantage of their position and then deliver the dividend of democracy to the larger society. That is their role, that's their responsibility. None of them were appointed, whether the governor or the State House Assembly, none of them were appointed to go and fight. I mean, the electors, if they want to watch a wrestling match and the rest of that, they know where to get that. Not in governor, not in the seat of power. They are expecting the best. They need good governance. They need the governor to consolidate on what the previous governor had done and all that. And the only way that can be done is when there's peace.
But are you optimistic? Because again, there's been so much talk about peace and reconciliation, but are you optimistic about the leg that this peace is standing on?
And that's what I'm saying. It's too early in the day to say that we'll not have peace. Because if you still have matters in court, if you have, it's disputed, that's how I see it. But I think that they can consolidate on it. Whether there will be peace or not in Rivers State going forward, it's up to the leaders. It's up to the leaders and the elders who have largely failed. Because I have thought that the elders of that state would have been able to quell the crisis. But what they did was they took side. They took side and they got it wrong. Because it's whether Wike is at fault or Fubara is at fault, the elders need not take side. What they should have looked at is peace, how we can broker peace. I
guess it became the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Very well.
But I also wanted to ask, because we've seen now that the APC has, in the last local government election, won 23 local government elections, and then the PDP has 3. Fubara currently ran on the platform of the PDP, so he's a PDP governor.
Yes.
And now that the APC has 23 local government, what does that tell you? They're saying that Rivers is very strategic, in terms of resources and in terms of politically as well. What does that tell you about the governor and the platform if he's going to run? First of all, do you think he will run for a second term? And then do you think he will stay in the PDP for long? Yeah,
what he did before now was he used the APP to conduct. Remember, there was a local government election he conducted. That was cancelled, yes. And filling those, got almost everything, 22 or thereabout seats by the APP. That's supposed to be his comeback structure. That's the structure in it, because you cannot be a governor if you don't have local government chairman in you. How are you going to do it? They are the grassroots mobilizers. Okay. So now that was cancelled and you don't have this one. This particular one is not, the people who are there, the people there now are not his loyalists. They are of Wike's. And that is the block to take him down. Whether he will be able to come back if you want to contest again is heavily dependent on the support of those local government chairmen, except he's able to pull 2 very important streams. First, he has sympathy. Nigerian politics, you need sympathy. He has sympathy and he has the resources, but does not have the structure of ground. Except he is able to do what the Edo State governor did then under Oshomole and the Obaseki. What happened in that case where the godfather was in a different point, the governor had to defect from that political party, APC to PDP, and still won. But Edo and Rivers are different. Okay.
And I guess sympathy, like you mentioned, also played out in that election.
It works in Nigerian politics.
But as we wind down the conversation, what lesson is there to learn for all stakeholders?
Well, the lesson there is that it is better to cooperate in politics than to divide the house. Because if you divide the house, you'll be distracted. You will not be able to move forward. The state will not grow. Because if they do well, the people will elect them again. But when they begin to fight all over the place, there's no way the people have trust in them. So it is better anywhere. That is why it's better to negotiate, find your way around peaceful coexistence. That's the only way politics can actually, because politics has to do with interpersonal relationships. You understand? Most times, you find the very unqualified in high positions. You understand? Even in the state house, even in the Federal House, the National Assembly. Sometimes you find someone, I mean, the Senate President today, there are a lot of members in the House that are better schooled, well-visioned, and progressive than he is. But today is the leader because it has to do with interpersonal relationship and what you're able to put forth, okay? And your capacity and ability to manage people and all that. So they should, cooperate. That is the only way you can have peace.
Thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure to have you on. Evers Ufeli, lawyer. Thank you for your time.
Very well.
All right, there is an African adage that says that when two heavyweights fight, it is the ground that suffers, which means, when two elephants fight, it is the ground that suffers, which means that when two heavyweights are in a clash, whether political heavyweights or financial heavyweights, it is the grassroots or the people who suffer. And in this case, it is a Dangote refinery and Nupeng that seem to be having a crisis between them. And Nigerians are worried about what this could mean in terms of fuel availability. And that's a conversation after this break. Stay with us.